Wow. Um, I think I need to pinch myself because I never imagined that we would be here today, 10 years on into the journey of establishing African Leadership Academy. I stand before you here today as a mere servant of a vision that is bigger than any one of us. And as a servant of a journey that many of us have been on through thick and thin for the last decade. We're celebrating today not just 10 years of ALA's journey, but really we're here to celebrate the very future of our continent. And I'm overjoyed with the tremendous belief that all of you are showing by coming from all over the world to be with us today. Now, before we get started, I think I need to clarify something. ALA has been in operation for 10 full years, and that's what we're celebrating today. We have admitted 10 classes, and we've trained almost 1,000 young leaders. However, if we want to be completely accurate, the journey of establishing ALA actually started 14 years ago. When Chris and I graduated from Stanford, we began working on this in 2004. So it's actually 14 years since the whole project started. And today I want to share with you 3 stories about this journey that we've been on. Just 3 stories. The first story is about opportunity. In 2008, I was invited to give the keynote address at Harvard Business School's Africa Business Conference. And at the end of this conference, I announced that we were selecting the first class to join us at the African Leadership Academy. At the end of the conference, there was a party, a closing party. And it was an invitation-only thing for speakers and other special guests. And in the middle of the event, this young, scrawny white man came up to me, and he was shaking as he was talking to me. I said, and he introduced himself. He said his name was Eric Glustrom, and he was with an organization called Educate. And he had traveled all the way from New York to see me because he heard I was going to be at this conference. And he didn't have an invitation, but he had somehow snuck in because he wanted to tell me about a young man called Joseph Munyabanza. And this man, he said, was a refugee from the Congo. But he was living in a refugee camp in Uganda, and he had built an amazing organization in his refugee camp to help educate other young people. And he was providing healthcare services and all these things. And he said, you have to admit this guy. He's applied to your first class. So I said, okay, fine. I took his name. I then went back home and looked through our admissions files. And unfortunately, this man was set to be rejected because his grades were not good enough. But then I thought further. I said, if this person had so inspired someone to come and sneak into a party to tell me about him, there must be something special about this kid. And so we admitted him. Today, 10 years on, Joseph Munyabanza is serving on the UN Secretary General's Advisory Council for Youth. He has expanded his organization. He's built schools in his refugee camp. He's training thousands of young people. And he recently told me that he was working on a project with the Minister of Education from the Congo to get 1 million young children back into school in the Congo. On his WhatsApp, he is in contact with Nobel Prize winners like Malala Yousafzai who also serves on the UN Secretary General's Council for Youth. I tell you this story because it illustrates three things. The first thing is it illustrates what happens when you give young people with talent an opportunity. And this is really what we do at ALA. We find young people with potential, we give them opportunities to develop, and then we plug them into very powerful networks so that they can take their impact and expand it at a much larger scale. It's also a powerful reminder to me about just how much talent there is on this continent that unfortunately doesn't get these opportunities. See, I believe that talent is evenly distributed throughout the world, but opportunity is not. And it is our job to try and find young people and give them that opportunity. The third thing this story reminds me of is just how far we've come as ALA, as an institution. From a refugee camp to advising the UN Secretary General, to being on a first-name basis with Nobel Prize winners, to running his own organization and sponsoring young people to go to school and to get opportunities like he had. All in just 10 years. So this to me is a real sign of the progress that we have made as an institution, and this is why we're all here to celebrate. As Notorious B.I.G. once said, birthdays worth the birthdays. And now, the second story I'd like to tell is about faith. You may have heard earlier today about how things got so bad in the early days, financially, that we had to raise money. We were constantly running out of money. When I graduated from Stanford Business School, I had to come up with $120,000 to pay back McKinsey. And I had to borrow money from my mother. I don't know where my mother is yet. She's typically late. She may not even be here. But if you're here, Mom, I want to thank you for that loan that you gave me. In those days, I had no salary. So for 2 years, what I would do is I would schedule a meeting at breakfast, one at lunch, and one at dinner. And because I was a poor, starving entrepreneur, the people who took me out would typically cover the bill. The other people that were on the team also had not been paid. I remember one particular day where I was in New York, and I took a train from New York to New Jersey to go and see a donor to ask them for money. And as it would have it, I didn't get the money that day. Unfortunately, I was so broke that I didn't even have money to get the train back to the other side of the island, to get back to New York. And here I was in New Jersey looking at the skyscrapers on the other side of the island, of the river, and remembering how my classmates from Stanford Business School were all sitting in those skyscrapers, earning hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I didn't even have train fare to get back to the other side. So things got so bad that we got to a head, and the founders called a meeting and they said, we're going to shut down this project. Where everyone has to go home, the team has to get other jobs. And, Acha and Peter agreed that they would fund me to go and raise money, but everyone else would have to stop. And so we said, okay, give us just a little bit more time, 2 more months. And we agreed that in 2 months, everything would stop if we didn't get any support. A month later, we were looking for a site that could potentially be the campus for the university, for the academy. And we went to a building in the cradle of humankind where there was a conference center. And we said, we'd like to rent this conference center to use as the academy. And so, well, we don't have any space here. But why don't you go next door? There's a property that maybe you can use. So we went next door and we said, why did they send us here? It's just a farm. There's nothing here that we can use for the university, for the academy. But the person who managed the farm said, you know, we don't have anything that you can use for your school, but the person who owns this property is very interested in education. So why don't you send us a little write-up about what you're doing? So we put a one-pager, and we said, okay, literally one sentence about the vision for the academy, and the rest was, we need so many rooms and so many beds, and we sent it off. And it turns out that that land was owned by an angel called Rebecca Oppenheimer. And she saw this note and said, well, I don't have a property that you can use for your academy, but I'm willing to build it for you. And we said, what? Does she know how much it's going to cost to build this? So Chris and I flew up to Seattle to see her, and we met her, and she didn't know who we were, but she committed $5 million. Rebecca, please stand. So 2 months before the whole project was to be shut down, Rebecca came into our lives, and she has since continued to support us. She's become the single largest individual donor to the African Leadership Academy. And we honestly would not be here without her. So what that really tells me is that in the pursuit of a big goal, there will be many, many times when it will appear completely impossible. None of it was logical. Why were we sent to this empty farm where there was not a place for us to build, to use for our campus? And if it wasn't to meet Rebecca. Why did she trust two young guys that she had never met? It's completely inexplainable. But what this really tells me about the importance of having faith, and that sometimes when things are meant to happen, they just do. The third story I want to tell is about partnership. I really believe that great accomplishments are never achieved alone, and ALA is no different. It has drawn on the strengths and energies of people from all over the world. Thousands of people have given blood, sweat, and tears to get us to this point. ALA really shows to me the power of humanity and collaboration. So who has been part of this team? About 5,000 schools across Africa have over the years become our partners, feeding us talented young people that can become part of our community. 200 staff members have worked for us over the years. Over 100 university partners that take our graduates after they leave us and give them opportunities. Corporate partners that give them internships. Guest speakers who come to campus to inspire them. So I want us to give us a round of applause to all these people. Host families, parents, especially that first class of parents when 1,700 young people applied to a school with no track record. What were those parents smoking to let their students apply to this school with no track record? So we really owe deep gratitude to this group. I also want to thank what I call the Club of 100. Since inception, this project has attracted about 150 million US dollars from donors all around the world, and foundations and individuals. But I like to think of that in rand terms. That's about 2 billion rand. that has been invested in this project. But of all of these funds that have been raised, there have been thousands of donors, about 5,000 donors. Just 100 of these people have contributed over 95% of this total. 100 individuals and foundations have been so instrumental in making this happen. And tonight I want to thank all of them. Some of them who are here in this room. Margie and Nate Thorne from New York City. Who gave us our very first investment after we won the Echoing Green Fellowship. Cheryl Dorsey from Echoing Green. I just mentioned the great Rebecca Oppenheimer. Caitlin Barron from the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation. Benga and Aisha Oyebode from Nigeria, who are sitting here. Alan Main and his partner Terman from New Jersey. John and Holly Cummings. John was my first boss at McKinsey. Ed and Amy Brakeman, huge supporters of ours. Nonkubela Ngoops Mayatula, as she's known, from South Africa. Nicola and Paul Harris. Standard Bank, represented here by Tembi Kuzwayo. Elma Philanthropies, our friends, many of them who are here today. Mary and Jeff Zients. Lisa and David Isroff. Hakeem and Maima Bello Sagi, you heard from Hakeem this morning. Tunde and Reni Funawio from Nigeria again. Notice how the Nigerians keep coming on. South Africans, where are you? Kenyans, where are you? Dina Trujillo from Omidyar Network. Temp and Dennis Keller. Tasha and John Morgridge, who have flown here from San Francisco. And of course, the MasterCard Foundation, represented by Rita Roy. They've made a huge commitment, over $50 million to ALA. Building this institution would also not have been possible without the support of our families. So I want to pay special tribute today to the families of the four founders, especially Dr. and Dr. Mrs. Professor Achaleke. Okay. That's how the Nigerians prefer to titles. And his Acha's family in Glan, and everyone else who has been very supportive to get us to this point. Peter Momba and his wife Busi, who allowed us to use their home as our office for 2 years, almost caused Peter to get divorced. Chris's parents, Jim and Julie Bradford. And Chris's wonderful partner, Genevieve. And Chris's grandfather, Judd Bradford, who encouraged and mentored us in our early days. I also want to thank my own family members who are finally showing up. My mom, my sisters, Constance and Susan. There's my mom. My cousin Tommy, who has come all the way from this event, and the list goes on. I would also like to give special thanks to my wife Amanda. We really, really appreciate all of you who have supported us to get here. I also want to give special thanks today to 3 people who cared tremendously about this vision, but who unfortunately have passed away. Jennifer Oppenheimer, the late Jennifer Oppenheimer. Bra Hugh Masekela, who performed at this event 10 years ago. And Osaze Osifo from Nigeria, who is really the reason why there's so many wonderful Nigerians supporting us today. There are also many special guests who have joined us for this celebration. Emir Lamido Sanusi from Nigeria, His Highness, His Royal Highness, Mama Grasa Michelle, Trevor Manuel, Dr. Nkosana Moyo, the Board of Directors of African Leadership Academy, current and present, the Global Advisory Council of African Leadership Academy. There's also a special guest here from one of our university partners, Jonathan Burdick, from the University of Rochester, the university that has single-handedly taken the most ALA graduates. They've had about 50 graduates from ALA. I also want to thank the staff members of ALA. Please stand. None of this magic would be possible without them. Especially those long-term staff members like Gavin Peter, Michael Giampo, Chameli Kipkara, Tanya, and someone like Liz Gibbs, who has been working tirelessly to make sure that our supporters all around the world have, and in the African Leadership Foundation have become such a strong part of our network as well. Thank you, Liz. Of course, I would like to make special tribute as well to the other co-founders, Acha, Chris, and Peter Mombao. Our students, 1,000 of who have, had faith in this idea. And finally, the team that organized this entire decennial event. So as we look forward to the next 10 years, I hope we will reflect on the importance of building strong African institutions, such as African Leadership Academy. Because I think one thing we're very good at doing in Africa is starting projects. The continent is littered with projects that all had good intentions, but they died after those who started them lost energy, or after those who initially funded them stopped funding them. And institutions are organizations that are much beyond any one person. They live on, they assume a life of their own, and they continue achieving the vision that has been set out over many generations and over many centuries. And so that is what, as we look forward to the next 10 years, if I have one wish, it is that we will continue to build this African institution, and that all of its affiliates, the African Leadership Network, the African Leadership University, the African Leadership Finance Corporation, the Anzisha Fellowship, all of this, what you see here at ALA is really the center of an ecosystem of many other institutions that are being built to ultimately develop 3 million leaders for the continent of Africa over the next 50 years. But it all started with ALA. So as we continue building this broader movement of leadership, there are 3 things that it will require. is for us to continue giving opportunity to young people like Joseph, to continue to have faith that it will come true, to fruition. Like the faith we had that ultimately led us to Rebecca. And that we need to keep doing this in partnership with all of you in this room. So thank you for a wonderful 10 years, and here's to another amazing 10 years and 50 years for ALA. Thank you.